Hey everybody, I'm Greg Bosson, president of QuickBooks Made Easy for Nonprofits with this month's Quick Tip. This is April of 2023, and this tip is for those of you that are using the online edition, and it's specifically for those of you that have restricted grants. Now, the thing that we're going to be talking about with this tip is indirect costs. There are grants that will allow you to spend money, some of the grant dollars, on indirect costs, and maybe they had just a flat percentage. You can use 10% on indirect costs, and basically, how do you track that stuff in QuickBooks? Okay, that's what this tip is about. Now, before I go any further, I need you to understand in general how you track grants. So I'm going to go over something with you that you should already know. If you don't know this, you need more training from us. But you should be using the customer or project field, which is this field right here, to point transactions to a grant. Okay? You shouldn't be using the class field or the category field. You should be using the customer or project field. And if you do that, then that enables you to get a nice little P&L for your grant. Again, if you don't know about this, you need to take some training from us. But I'm assuming that you do. If you've trained with us before, you know to use the customer job field or project field to point expenses to a grant. And this is a nice little report, little P&L for a grant showing you that we've gotten in $10,000 and this is all the dollars that we've literally spent because we pointed expenses to them. But if you have a grant that allows for an indirect cost allocation. In other words, some of the grant, we'll say 10%, can be used to pay overhead. And rather than the grantor saying, hey, give me the exact expenses that were for overhead that you paid for out of the grant, they just say, you know what, we're just going to do a safe harbor. You see this a lot in federal grants where it's like, 10% of the grant can be used for overhead. So when you bill us, maybe it's a reimbursement grant, just charge us 10% more for the overhead, okay? So I need that 10% to show on this report so I can really see how much of the grant I need to bill for, how much I've used. But unlike the rest of these expenses where there was a literal transaction that I pointed to the project or the customer, the grant, there isn't a real transaction, for overhead. Now, I suppose I could, when I enter overhead costs, I could try and point them to a grant, but that's a little obnoxious when we know we're going to be able to just use a flat 10%. So how do I get that in there? Okay, how do I get my overhead allocation expense to show when there's not really a transaction for it? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a transaction to show the indirect cost allocation. So this is going to blow your mind, so pay attention, okay? So what I'm going to do, first of all, is I'm going to go to my chart of accounts list, and I'm going to create an expense account called indirect cost allocation, okay? So I'm going to go to my chart of accounts. I'm going to click on new. I'm going to make it an expense account, save it under expenses, and I will make it this part here doesn't really matter. Sorry about that. This is real life. Really wouldn't be that. It doesn't really matter what you put here at all. This field always annoys me. It's completely irrelevant. But anyway, so I'll just put it to the first one. Doesn't matter. But we're going to call this indirect cost allocation. All right. Now, we'll give it a number, and you want to give it a number so that it's all the way at the bottom. As you can see, I already have an account for it, so I'm not going to save this. I'm just going to go down to the bottom here where the expenses are, and you'll see I have an expense account called Indirect Cost Allocation right there. I gave it the last number in the expenses because I want it to appear all the way at the bottom of your P&L, okay? So, and then I'm going to do a journal entry, okay? So we'll do it at the end of the month. Each month we'll do it to record the indirect cost allocation. So what you'll do is you'll run your little P&L. You should know already how to do this because you've hopefully taken my training before. And you'll see, okay, we've got $7,130 in costs for this particular month. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a journal entry. And where's my journal entry? And we'll make the entry. I'll make it the last day of the month, 6/30/25, and I'm going to pick the indirect cost allocation, and I'm going to both debit it and I'm going to credit it. I'm going to do both, all right? And the reason why I'm going to do both is because I don't really want to affect the books overall. The only reason I'm doing the entry is so it'll appear on this report. But there's not really specific expenses. Those have already been expensed, all right, when I entered the checks and bills. This is just to get this indirect cost allocation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick 10% of, what is this? This is 7130, so 10% of that is 713. So I'm going to go and I'm going to put $713. I'm going to debit the grant, Bill Sims Foundation. If you're using classes, and you should be, we'll put it to whatever program it relates to. And then I'm going to credit the same account, but I'm going to leave the name field blank. All right? So look at what I'm doing. I'm not really changing my overall books at all because I'm debiting and crediting indirect cost allocation, so it'll net to zero. It won't affect my books. But only debiting is going to the grant, not the crediting. And so then when I save it, it's going to appear here. Now, one thing you may notice is if you're an accounting person, you're kind of like, well, why am I, this is weird. It seems like the debit's usually on the first line. Well, whatever grant that you want to point it to, make the name on the second line in order for this to work. The reason why is because if I had this reversed and I had the debit on the first line and I put the name of the grant on the first line, then even if I left the second line blank, it would assume, this is kind of a quirk in QuickBooks, it assumes whatever's on the first line under name will also be on the second line under name. So basically both of the lines will be pointed to Bill Sims Foundation. It's a positive and a negative, and it won't appear on this report. So what I do instead is always put the blank on the first line of the entry and then put the name of the grant as a debit on the second line. Then this will be pointed to Bill Sims' report, but the first one won't. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to go back to my other report. Okay, so here it is, total expense, $71.30. I'm going to refresh the report, just run report again, and now you will see here's my indirect cost allocation. So see, it doesn't affect the overall report. Let me show you. If I run just a regular old P&L, let me go and run a regular old P&L. Let's see, I'll go to a standard report. I wonder if I'll do a regular old P&L, and we'll just do it for 06/30/25. Okay. So if you notice, you see, it's showing here, but it's zero. Because again, if I double click on it, it debited and credited the same account. That's what that journal entry was. So it netted itself to zero. The only thing about it is it's a little annoying because I don't want this zero on the report. Well, the reason why the zero is on the report is because kind of the default position for reporting in QuickBooks is that if the transaction, if the account's ever been used in a transaction, it's going to appear on the report, even if it zeroes itself out, okay? So if I want this not to show the zeros, and this is something that's probably good to know anyway, you see this thing right here, people don't even know about it. It says show non-zero or active only, okay? So right now it's showing active, which means any accounts that have any activity in them will show. This one had activity in it, a plus and a minus, netted to zero. If I click this, I can say, please show just all non-zeros. So then when I run the report, I have to run it twice. Now it disappears altogether. So see, I get this beautiful report here, but it doesn't screw up my P&L for the grant that shows the indirect cost. It's awesome. So if you like the way I teach and you want to learn more, if you go to QuickBooks Made Easy and go to webinars, we have a training coming up just for those of you using QuickBooks Online and want to learn more about tracking restricted grants. It comes up on April the 26th. It's $179. I think there's a discount somewhere in the video here, a code. You can get a little bit of discount off. It's 2 hours. Says it's 90 minutes here. It's really 2 hours. Goes from 2 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. Goes through everything you could ever imagine about tracking your grants in QuickBooks. And yes, we'll cover projects as well for those of you that are interested in that. If you need more overall training in QuickBooks, either you're new or you've been using it for a while, but you're self-taught and you feel like you need some more, on May 30th, starting on May 30th, we have a 3-day webinar series. It's 2 hours a day for 3 days. We're going to learn everything you could ever imagine about QuickBooks Online. If you are a nonprofit, you'll be able to ask questions. It's extremely thorough. I'll be the one teaching it. I teach the restricted grants one too. But anyway, that's everything we're learning on day 1, day 2, day 3. You get CPE credits for it if you're an accountant. It's something we do twice a year, and it's kind of like our main deal. And it's awesome. So if you are interested, please sign up for it. And I think you should. We're going to have fun. See you there.